Good morning guys. In today's video I've got some tips and tricks on how you can move your plants, and when you do move your plants, how you can ensure the best success and the plant survives. Now, there's a number of reasons you may want to move your established plants. It might be that you're moving home and you want to put all your plants into pots, or maybe it's to do with something's becoming a bit too big and a bit too much of a thug and you want to sort of move it to a different place of the garden and effectively sort of redesign your garden. Now, whatever the reason, there are some tips and tricks to make sure this works. Now, there is one sort of tip and trick that I'm kind of going to ignore in this video for moving plants, and that is ensuring you move them at the correct time of year that suits the plant. Some plants like to be moved in the dormant period because there's no leaves, there's no fruit or flower on them, and they can be moved and it doesn't cause much distress. It's spring now in this video, and I've kind of got to move everything because I've got a big delivery of plants to fill some new borders that I had created when the garden was landscaped. And because of that, there's one particular border I need to clear and I need to get everything out. But I'm quite attached to some of the plants there, some of which I grew from seed, and I really want to keep them. So that's sort of the inspiration to making this video. But unfortunately, like a lot of you, whether you're moving house or something, you'll be under a bit of a time pressure and you won't necessarily be able to wait until the correct season. So it's worth bearing that in mind, that ideally there are some plants that you want to move in winter that I'm not going to be able to do this time around. Now, I'm going to start off easy in terms of moving plants, and the first plant I want to move is these chives. Now, these chives are beautiful. I really like having them in the garden, and they give these beautiful pink flowers, and there's a few buds just appearing now. And I've had these for probably 3 years now in this spot, and one of the great things and one of the easiest sort of things to do is to move a clump forming plant. So with these, when I dig them up, you'll hopefully see that there's kind of bulbs and roots, and the plant can be split into clumps. So not only is the dividing of the plant sort of beneficial in terms of I get more plants, but it also means the plant is quite well suited to being moved. And that's why moving something like chives is pretty straightforward. But I'm going to get into it now, dig it up, and we'll take a quick closer look. Now, the next tip I want to talk about is using a fork rather than a spade. If you use a spade, likely you're severing the roots and things like that, whereas with a fork you're more likely sort of ripping the roots, and it's just a bit better for the plant, especially when your soil is as hard as mine. We've had quite a dry spell this spring and everything is rock solid, and I've got very heavy clay soil, so it's quite hard for me to actually do this, but I can hear the roots sort of shredding and tearing out. And again, as you know, common sense dictates, getting as much root out as possible is key. Now, once you've got your plant out of the ground, especially if it's something you can sort of divide, the next thing you do is really to divide it. And with chives, it's quite sort of small and light, so sort of easily you sort of tear it apart with your hands into 2 clumps. And I mean, I had 3 clumps here, so I can sort of in theory have 6 chive plants, and still have, to be honest, I could make them even smaller, in which case I might actually do that with this one here. It's just really dead easy to do with sort of chives and things like that, and it's actually a good thing for the plant. By dividing the plant, you encourage the plant to put on new groove. What you will find with clump forming plants is they'll sort of plateau, and they might even stop flowering and things like that, just because they kind of get used to the sort of environment and they're not in that sort of fight or flight distress, which forces them to flower and things like that. So something to think about is sort of periodically, and I think sort of RHS and sort of horticultural sort of books and things advise dividing your sort of perennials every sort of 3 years, especially if you've got things like hostas. And that's one thing you can do to sort of make your garden a bit better and also restructure things. Now, one final tip for this sort of type of plant is once you've moved a clump, because you've likely disturbed some of the roots, you can trim off the foliage so there's not so much burden on the plant. And obviously with chives, you know, that's a good harvest of chives there for eating. But by trimming it like this, although it looks a bit rubbish and ugly, it's reduced the amount of water the plant needs to keep these leaves going. So doing something like this, you know, especially with something like chives, isn't going to do any harm. And the plant will bounce back a lot healthier, and probably next year you'll have a beautiful looking chive plant. Now, there are some plants you might look at and think they're too big to save, but again, the key with that is to trim off the sort of foliage that you don't want. So if I look here at this beautiful sage plant that I grew from seed, which is absolutely massive now, but I absolutely love it because it flowers beautifully in the sort of spring. So I'm a bit gutted I've got to move it now, but if I trim off some of these branches and make it a bit more smaller and compact, I might be able to save it. The thing that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take off the lateral sort of branches, the ones that are going out sideways, so I keep a nice sort of clump plant, but at the same time I sort of, anything that's hanging over or going out sideways, I'm going to take that out so I can sort of make it a bit more compact and a bit more easier for me to manage. But honestly, it's one of those things where sometimes a plant in the right spot, under the right conditions, even something fairly tricky to grow like sage, because it's a Mediterranean style plant, you can just have an absolute great time with. Now, unfortunately, as is the way with an English spring, the sun has turned into rain. So I've got to be quite quick to finish this video. But before I do, I want to talk about moving large shrubs. And this isn't a particularly large shrub, but this is a rose bush here. And it's a beautiful, there's a beautiful yellow flower that turns to like a nice sort of yellowy pink as the flower gets older. But it's no good here in this position, and I need to rethink where I want to put it. Now, roses are one of those plants where they are tough as old boots, and what I'm really going to do here to help me move it and help me dig it out is I'm going to trim back the foliage. Now again, this is one of those ones I mentioned at the beginning of the video, which is much better being done in the dormant season, probably sort of, I don't know, autumn time, or maybe even like sort of late winter, before it buds out. But I've let this one leaf up a bit too much. So first thing I'm going to do is give it a bit of a prune and then dig it out before potting it up. Now, in terms of pruning, always make sure you wear some form of protection, like some gloves. And if you don't have any, get yourself a pair of Slarmore gloves from Amazon, and you'll be well away. But basically, I'm really sort of cutting out the sort of weaker stems, the ones that are sort of pencil thick. I want to keep, and I'm sort of taking it back to what I would say is like a healthy looking sort of bud, really. So there's some sort of branches here that look a bit diseased and rubbish anyway, and I probably should have pruned out in the winter, but as I haven't, might as well get it done now. So I'm sort of bringing it back maybe a half in terms of height, and this will make it much easier to sort of manage and sort of dig out and things. Now again, a bit like anything, try and get as much root as possible, but it's inevitable that you're gonna sort of have to tear and break some. And with these roses here, my God, has it got a set of roots on it. Now, unfortunately, the rain is going to keep on coming thick and fast today, so I'm kind of going to end the video here. But there's a couple main points you want to take away. One is obviously get as much root as possible. Secondly, hello dogs. Secondly, if you've got the opportunity to divide the plant, and it's a good opportunity to take when you're moving the plants, splitting them into two and potting them on, and then you can move them elsewhere. And the final thing to mention is if you find yourself digging up a plant and you can't get all the roots out, chances are you probably need to trim off some of the branches or some of the foliage to ease the burden on the plant, because otherwise it's going to really struggle while it's sort of getting its roots back in the ground. So yeah, I really hope you like that video, and if you've got any comments or questions on this, leave them in the comments and I'll try to get back to you. And yeah, if you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you all soon.